home?
There should be more travel restrictions. When I came back from Brazil with salmonella in 1974, I was immediately reported to the health department. There needs to be, more reporting and more restrictions.
Thank you. All right, folks. Also in the news, unfortunately, I suppose, ISIS, or the Islamic State as it's known, a group we haven't heard much about before this year. This terrorist group is supposedly worse than Al-Qaeda. They've captured a good deal of Iraq and Syria. Do you support the current course of military action, airstrikes for now, against ISIS taken by the president and other countries? If not, why not? And we'll start with Chris.
I don't support airstrikes because the United States Congress has not voted to go to war. And this endless military wars that we're in and year out, I'm suspicious, because of the fact that Congress hasn't voted for war, that these are all defense, funding tricks. Creating, ISIS is another name for old Al-Qaeda members. They're some of the same people. So defense funding, these defense corporations want more and more money to build more and more weapons and more fighter jets. So they're constantly creating more wars so they can make money for these multinational mega corporation defense contractors.
Very good. Mr. Donker, we're going to go over this way.
I believe that the airstrikes are a good start. ISIS has to be stopped. I mean, they're a terrorist group. They're vicious. They have no concern for human life, and we have to stop them. If we don't stop them there, they've said themselves they want to come here and do it. So we do have to stop them. I don't think airstrikes alone are going to do it. A lot of the advisors to the president have said, the military advisors saying, airstrikes alone will not stop them. We're going to have people on the ground eventually. Do I want to see American boots on the ground? No, I don't. Nobody wants to put our people in harm's way. But, it's a volunteer military. They joined up knowing that they were there to protect our country. If we need to utilize them, we're going to have to utilize them. I agree with the idea of training the other countries that are around the area. They need to have skin in the game and be involved in it. But I don't think we can wait 5 to 7 months to train them. I think we have to take some sort of a stance sooner.
Mr. Andrews, airstrikes against ISIS.
Absolutely not. I've been an anti-war activist since before the invasion of Iraq, and it's part of what's inspired me to be a candidate here and to represent the Liberty Union Party. I tend to agree with Chris that this is really about money. It has more to do with politics here in the U.S. than what's going on over there. We have to be honest with ourselves. We've had 13 years of a war on terror, so-called, and what's it done? It's created more terrorists, and it's great for the military spending, which is nearly 50% of our federal budget. But it's terrible for the United States. We're a declining empire, and we need to. I'm not an isolationist. I really sympathize with people who are suffering over there, and there's no magic wand to fix it. But the real solution is going to be stopping the bombings, which create the climate for terror, and stopping this distribution of weapons. Just recently in the news, we've had airdropped weapons falling in the hands of our supposed enemies. It's just such a mess over there that there is no military solution, and it's been a real betrayal to that this. Even after the election of Obama, that this kind of conflict is going on almost 8 years later.
Mr. Welsh.
Number one, if there's going to be sustained military action, including airstrikes, I agree with Chris. We have got to have Congress vote yes or no on that. Second, there's collective revulsion at ISIS, and they're as bad as my colleagues here have said. And the beheadings were just revolting. But the real issue here is the ongoing Sunni-Shia divide. And at a certain point in that region of the country, where the lid has been kept on that with despotic rulers like Saddam Hussein and Assad, the people in that region are going to have to make their own decision about whether they want to live in a civil society or have a civil war. And we can be helpful. We can be helpful to Turkey. We can be helpful with those satellite countries where there's huge refugee problems. I supported the bombing that protected the Yazidis from the genocide. But our role has to be in support, not boots on the ground like we did in Iraq, not boots on the ground in nation building like we did in Afghanistan. And it's not just because I want to keep us out. It's because the only way they're going to have a future is if they step up and have some responsibility for their own future.
Mr. Judell, dealing with ISIS.
Thank you. This is part of the larger so-called war on terror. First of all, I did some research on the so-called war on terror, and there are roughly 10,000 American casualties as a result of the so-called war on terror. I'd like to call to your attention that the results, shall we say, the backwash is much worse than the actual initial danger. This is about public safety. Remember Saddam Hussein, how he was drummed up to be the biggest bad guy since Hitler? Remember that? We lost how many thousands? And what we also did was we created a political vacuum and destabilized the Mideast, which is the real reason why we're now facing the unintended consequences, as various people such as Eisenhower referred to in the 1956 Suez Crisis. Yes, we're making matters worse with a short-term quack cure solution that won't work. So I'm against the so-called war on terror. Thank you very much.
Mr. Meyer, ISIS.
I agree generally, especially about the blowback. It goes back to the 60s. Bob Dylan wrote, "You've been hiding too long behind the American flag." And I think the patriots in this country sometimes forget what got us here. It's the United States of amnesia, as Gore Vidal said.
That's a good one.
But more personally, I'm not a full-fledged pacifist. I'm more of a personal pacifist in my personal life. And that's one of the reasons I'm running, is we're all morally compromised after 10 years of what is generally considered baloney by more of your historically informed Americans. Think of these wars as just, they don't make any sense. Now, the reason I am a personal pacifist is the sheer contradiction of war. Thermodynamically, I'm a scientist. I think about things in terms of efficiency. And you think of all the work that people did, the masons and the carpenters. They go out there and build up huge, wonderful cities. And think of all the hard work it takes to knock them down. It's just foolish, and it's bad for the energy equation.
How do we get Arab allies to have more skin in the game over there? Chris.
When you say Arab allies, IBM was recently sold to Global Foundries. And Global Foundries, Peter, that's owned by which Arab country?
Qatar.
Qatar. It's hard to pronounce. Okay, so, and that's an Arab country.
I might be wrong.
Pardon me?
Yeah, I may be wrong.
Oh, okay, so it's IBM was sold to Global Foundries, which is owned by the government, not just by Arab people, but by the government of an Arab country. I see that as a potential Trojan horse. I'm very concerned about that. It's so close to the Burlington International Airport, and if the F-35 strike fighter jets are parked at the airport and you've got IBM owned by the government of an Arab country that close to the airport, then I'm very concerned about that being a potential Trojan horse.
Anyone want in on this? My question is, I think you all expressed a desire to have neighboring countries to what's going on over there take more, step up more. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, not an Arab country, but Iran has been systemically excluded from the political process, and that's a big part of why there's been this festering conflict in Syria. The United States wants to portray itself as the police of the world, arbitrating over these conflicts, but the reality is that we're in there throwing fuel on the fire. And I really want to object to one of the things that Peter Welch has said earlier. This is not fundamentally a Arab-Sunni conflict that Saddam Hussein was keeping the lid on. Communities were intermixed, people were intermarried. This is a classic colonial, this is how colonialism plays out, where minorities get pitted against one another. And if you look at what came out on WikiLeaks, what Chelsea Manning released in the WikiLeaks, you can see that the United States was trying to manipulate the politics over there. And I really have no faith in the State Department to go in there and be that honest broker.
Yes, sir. Mr. Trudeau.
Geopolitics is something that our leaders should study, because it would illustrate the fact that the Middle East is far more complex than some two-dimensional thinkers seem to be. This isn't about good guys and bad guys. I would like to directly address your question by saying that I read in the New York Times just a few days ago that Turkey had agreed to allow Kurdish fighters into Syria. So that might be an example of perhaps, I'm speculating here, of what you said, America's role in working with and influencing allies to, shall we say, put their boots on the ground. So perhaps that's an example of that. I think the question of Iran, that was a good one that you brought up. Iran has been isolated because of our ridiculous politics of duplicity and hypocrisy, and it's a directly result of our politics that we now have this paradigm which is actually standing in the way of what should be happening there. So that's what I have to say.
Last call on, yes, sir.
No, I'm not sure there's anybody over there that we actually can work with. As far as I'm concerned, and I just forgot to say, so I'll get it in here real quick. Specifically, I support the bombing of the big material that they took that was intended for the Iraqi army, but I do not support boots on the ground, and I think it should be done in the safest possible way, with very minimal possible harm to our troops.
Last word, Mr. Welsh.
Well, the fundamental question for the President and for us is, what steps do we have to take to protect America and keep it safe? And there's two things that are potential threats. One is if there is a safe haven in that region for another al-Qaeda type situation or attack, as occurred in Afghanistan. I believe we have the right to destroy a safe haven that is going to be used to attack us. The second is that Homeland Security has a big job to make certain that some of these people, that misguided people, bad people, that are going, in some cases from the United States or European countries, on passports to do jihad and potentially could come back here and do harm to us, we've got to make sure they don't get back in to do that. But that's the fundamental interest of the United States. As far as the Sunni-Shia conflict, and that does have its origins in colonial past, but that's after World War I, not the current. That's where we have to be a facilitator with our allies to try to help people help themselves.
Thank you. If you're just joining us, it's just after 8 o'clock, and I would like to tell you that this is Vermont PBS's debates with the candidates for the United States House of Representatives. All 6 candidates on the ballot in Vermont this year are with us today. I'd like to quickly introduce them once again if you're just joining us. From left to right, Matthew Andrews, Liberty Union; Mark Donka, Republican; Chris Erickson, Independent; Randall Meyer from Energy Independence; Jerry Trudell, also an Independent; and Peter Welsh, Democrat. There's a spirited chat going on at #VTPoly on Twitter, and if you're also watching online by chance, this is a streaming event, you can see that conversation going up at the same side of the screen at the same exact time. It's a lot of fun. I suggest you try it out. Speaking of the military, we had email questions from our viewers, so I'd like to go to them, one of them right now. Alice Seymour from Winooski writes in, and this is a question for all the candidates: if you supported the decision to base Vermont Air Guard F-35s in Burlington by 2020, please tell us exactly why. If you did not, what steps will you take to alter or stop the course of this implementation? And we're going to go left to right this time with Mr. Andrews.
Yeah, well, I've written about the F-35. If you go to libertyunion.org, you can probably find more about what I've said there. But I've opposed the basing of the F-35 in Winooski. I think, first of all, it's a boondoggle project. It's a huge waste of our money to be spending, when you consider research and development as well as production, $1.5 trillion is going to this project. We don't need more planes. This is the exact opposite direction of where we need to be going. We need to be spending that money on social welfare at home and frankly, more diplomatic solutions to our problems abroad. On top of the fact that this is going to displace 3,000 homes, possibly estimated 8,000 residents with the increased noise. So it's something that we should be opposed, and I'm really disappointed that Welsh has continued to support this. He says he's against military spending, but it seems like whenever an actual vote comes up to an actual proposal, he's for it.
We're going to bounce around. Since Mr. Welsh, your name was just mentioned, we'll go over to you.
Well, there are two issues here. One was the funding and the deployment of the F-35s. That was a decision that was made long before I was in Congress, and in fact, I haven't voted for funding for the F-35, and I've opposed spending, excessive spending in military. But the question for us is, these F-35s have been built. They're going to be deployed. We have an Air Force that needs planes. And the question is, where will they be based? So this is not about whether they'll be built. They have been built. They exist. It's where they'll be based. I'm pretty proud of our Vermont Guard and our Air Guard, and this is an extraordinary vote of confidence in the qualifications of the men and women of the Guard that the Air Force chose Burlington and their airport. That airport is the place to locate them. Second, it is good for the airport, which is essential to our local economy. So on the question of where these planes that have been built are to be based, I do support having them based here. And by the way, the final thing, our Vermont Guard are Vermonters. They're going to do their level best to work with the neighborhood to mitigate some of the impacts that may occur as a result of the basing of those planes there.
Mr. Donka.
Yes, back in 2012 when I ran, I supported the F-35s then. I mean, the F-16s are being phased out. We do need another plane to take its place, basically. And we do need to have a strong national defense, and I'm behind that 100%. You know, one of the things is Congressman Welch mentioned was job loss. If we take the jets out of there, how many jobs would be lost in the Burlington area? It's hundreds of jobs that support the Air National Guard up there. What, you know, do? We don't need any more job loss in Vermont right now. We're having a hard enough time keeping jobs. We're starting to see our unemployment tick up. So, yes, I do support it. You know, we need a strong national defense. We were chosen because of our location. The military has looked at it and decided that, you know, this is the area we need to have the defense, and I trust the military advisors for that.
Mr. Trudell.
I think what we really need to do is defend our economy by, among other things, wasteful pork barrel misguided spending. Now, let's talk about defense. When was the last time this country was invaded? Was it 1812? Are the Canadians invading us? What is the purpose of the F-35 other than a pork barrel expenditure? And since they're already built, we might as well have them here. Well, that rationale is not good enough for me. I think what we really need to do is take a critical look at our true defense needs and the fact that Congress appropriates almost half of our tax dollars on so-called defense. I say so-called defense because it has nothing whatsoever to do with public safety. If anything, it's a detriment to public safety. 10,000 Americans killed is not safe. It is unsafe. Therefore, it's oxymoronic to say you support defense. You do not support defense. You support two-dimensional solutions, which don't work, by the way. We need to jumpstart the economy. Check out my website, jerrytrudelforcongress.com. Thank you.
Chris Erickson, F-35s.
I'm staying at a I'm staying at a motel near the airport, and business owners have been telling me that they're going to be put out of business because of the vibration. Everything on their shelves is going to fall off the shelves. It's just going to be too much for them. The F-35 strike fighter jets are designed to be dual capable to carry nuclear bombs. They do not belong in a neighborhood with children and families. Peter Welch wants to destroy the lives of 1,000 or more families who will have to move. The F-35 fighter jets can be affected by solar flares. Solar flares can disrupt GPS and communications. And if an F-35 jet crashes in Lake Champlain, that permanently destroys the water quality forever. F-35 jets do not belong in the most populated area of Chittenden County, Vermont. It is just plain wrong, and the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, President Obama, should be impeached before he gets away with putting them here.
Mr. Meyer.
Man is the only animal that blushes or needs to. I'd rather talk about something like the drones or the Icy Reach program. There's 800 billion records, phone records. There's only 7 billion people on Earth, and there's 800 billion phone records in a massive Google-like complex that the NSA and several other...
Oh, you talked about the National Security Agency.
Yeah, and the FBI and several others.
That's what I thought.
There's many of our law enforcement agencies. They all can tap into this Icy Reach.
Mark's friends.
Yeah, well, I already picked on Mark. Sorry. Well, and I just want to, so I'll say in summation, I think there are futures for humanity other than the horrors of 1984. Huxley was Orwell's French teacher at Eton College, and he had an alternative vision that was slightly less horrible.
Do you, sir, do you support or oppose the basing of the F-35s, though, on that
I thought
topic?
I made that clear.
Not at all.
Not,
I didn't.
I don't believe so.
Man is the only animal that blushes or needs to.
We'll take that as an answer. Mr. Welsh, you mentioned working with the neighbors of the area affected, and Alice lives in Winooski, so obviously she must be concerned. Are you confident that the military is listening to the people of Winooski and South Burlington?
You know, if you live there, this is a real challenge. It's your neighborhood, and anything that's going to have an impact on it, you've got to take very seriously. So I have a lot of respect for that. But I do believe that our Guard they're Vermonters. They've committed themselves to serving in the Air Guard, and these are local Vermont people. It's